Hi everyone, it's Ash from FPLHINTS here with my final UCL Fantasy draft ahead of Matchday 1. As always, if you're able to like, share and subscribe, that will be greatly appreciated. So I'll start off where I finished with the draft as it was in my last video. And with this draft, it was a significant overhaul with respect to my previous two iterations that were more, shall we say, gung-ho. So I've actually decided to make a considerable number of changes before I lock this draft in. The spine as a whole should remain the same, as well as the principle, but the changes that I had in mind, it basically factors in fixtures as well as form, as well as many other different things as well. So first and foremost, Bellingham, I don't think he played over the weekend. I'm not sure when he's going to return, and £9 million sitting on the bench seems fairly hefty. Of course, he'll be eased in to the squad as well, I'd expect, for the league games and Champions League matches as well. So I'm going to take him out. It's just too much of a price to pay for a player that might have limited minutes for the foreseeable future. Another player that I'm also going to get out, and this is a very difficult choice for me, is I saw Harry Kane score a hat-trick over the weekend. He was one of my quote-unquote Ferrari front three players that I had initially, but I had to get rid of him to get some balance. So I actually do want to get Kane in because of the favourable fixtures as well. Of course, I had Serge Gnabry as, shall we say, cover for Kane, but I don't think that's going to be enough. So I want to get Kane in. And reluctantly, Haaland, who's been in sensational form as well, he's got some reasonable fixtures as well. But ultimately, I've decided that with Kane, he's got a favourable opening fixture at home. And with Haaland, I'll try and get alternative cover for him. So yeah, I've got Gyökeres as well. He just seems to be scoring for fun, for sporting. Got Mbappe, who is worth his weight in gold as well. But a very tough one. Can't have a fourth striker, and I really don't want to go heavy. But I want Gyökeres. He just makes perfect sense. So Haaland goes out. I'm going to stick with Lamine Yamal. I think value for money at 7.5 million. Of course, in Euro Fantasy, they randomly listed him as a forward, and thankfully, he's listed as a midfielder in UCL Fantasy. Luke, 6 million. Just check out his goal involvement stats over the past year or so. I think he makes sense to have in my final squad as well. Got Brandt of Dortmund, 7.5 million, but I feel that there might be value elsewhere. So I'm going to remove him. And then onto the defense as well. I feel that there are some players that I can unlock here as well. So I'd say Gatti. I want Juventus cover. I think they've had two back-to-back clean sheets in the league. Very low-owned asset, surprisingly, in UCL Fantasy. Reasonable opening run of games. So I will get Juventus defensive cover, but it won't be Gatti. Konsa, just I have to get rid of him. The reason being that at 5 million, that's a bit expensive for a team that hasn't played Champions League football as we know it ever. So there are other more seasoned players that I am going to get. And also Konsa's got a bit of a tricky fixture run as well. And I've already discussed the fixture difficulty rating that I'm using from the Fantasy Football Pundit. Be sure to check that out in my other video. I'll put a link of that as well in the description below. So with that said, I'm just checking who else I'd potentially change. With the goalkeepers, got Di Gregorio and also got Blaswich. I think the rotation works really well. I'm not going to touch any touch that combination. I'm fairly content with that. So that leaves me just with the players at hand. Just if I confirm it there as well, got Dedic, 4.5 million, and Kubasi. So I'm going to focus on these players first and foremost before I lock in my team. So first of all, look, Harry Kane. I'm just looking at his ownership as well. You've got the likes of Haaland, who are double in ownership. I think there's a real upside opportunity here with Harry Kane, especially with that opening fixture. And like just 26% owned, which seems a bit crazy. I think a lot of people are put off by him with what they saw in the Euros. But here's the key thing, that with England at the Euros, they didn't really have any pacey wingers for this tournament, surprisingly. So it basically meant that in many ways he had to adapt his game, and he was massively affected in a negative way because it meant that those pacey wingers weren't there to support him. And if you look at Bayern Munich, it's a different operation altogether, and he obviously has been scoring brilliantly from the day he joined the club. So for me, with that opening fixture especially as the waiting, I want to hit the ground running. Of course, they got Aston Villa, Barcelona and PSG, but I think for the first four, I think I can potentially get away with having Harry Kane as my forward. So in he comes. So that leaves me with £27 million, and I've got these 3 spots to fill. I'll come on to the defence actually, and I was actually surprised he was the price that he is in UCL Fantasy. So I'll just come on to defenders, if I can get this right, apply the filters, and yeah, Hakimi, £5.5 million, just seems really super cheap. I look at the most expensive defenders. In fairness, there aren't any 7.0s in UCL Fantasy, unlike FPL. So he's not the most expensive player, but £5.5 million seems a bit cheap, and we know his attacking prowess as well. I did mention in the previous video that the fixture run in the first 8 for PSG is a bit difficult, but then you've got Girona and PSV, 2 of those matches in the first 3. So I think there's clean sheet potential there as well. But you haven't got him for the clean sheet potential. You've got Hakimi for his attacking prowess. I think £5.5 million. I really can't look beyond that. So that leaves me with £21.5 million now. Just make sure I've got the maths right here. So I talked about Juventus cover. And if I just actually go to Juventus here as well, there's a lot of different options here. I think it seems logical for me to have double Juventus cover. So just apply the filters. So I had Gatti, 1% owned. All of these players are like super cheap. Cambiasso is the one that I want to get in. He's £500,000 more. He's got the attacking prowess versus Gatti. So I'm fairly content there. Just trying to work out why. Of course, I also got rid of Brandt there as well. So I will also replace him. So the other player, and it's just on the midfielders, I'm going to check his ownership as well. So obviously, Gyökeres of Sporting, I got just due to the attacking prowess and the price he's at. But there's another player at Sporting Lisbon as well who offers exceptional value for his price point. Just going to find him there. There we go. So he's only 2% owned. That's a surprise. So Pedro Gonçalves, 6.5 million, out of position potential as well. I do recall that in some of the comments he was mentioned, and initially I couldn't make it work because not that I couldn't afford it, but like I felt that at that point I wanted Bellingham and other attackers there as well. But I think Gonçalves at 6.5 million, that is super cheap. So I have to get him in as well. So just reminding you of the fixture run for them. They've got Lille, PSV, and then with the next match, that's also fairly reasonable as well. But then you've got the pot 1 game of Man City and Arsenal afterwards. So what I basically see it as, that I can basically have Gyökeres and Gonçalves for these first 3 games. And then I'd obviously switch accordingly. So that leaves me with £9.5 million for my final pick in UCL Fantasy. So I was very reluctant to get rid of Haaland, but again, I had to make it work with Kane. Of course, I've got Serge Gnabry there as well, and I'll keep him just to show you, in fact, who the other £7.5 million options are as well. The one player that I really wanted, I think he's not 7.5 million, it's Danny Olmo. I think he's 8 million, so I can't stretch to him. But that would have left me with double Barcelona attacking cover. So let's just restrict it to £7.5 million. The other option would have been Musiala and that price point. So in terms of most owned, you got Florian Wirtz, could be another option there, Valverde, but just in that like team of Real Madrid, is he really going to be the chief player for goal involvements? I highly doubt it. So surprised at 18%. Rodri, 16%, just come back from injury. Ball recoveries metric gives him like an extra weighting in UCL Fantasy. Got same with Kimmich, but I just based on last season, I don't like fancy getting Kimmich in. Got Rafinha, I think offers good value as well, but again in a team where he isn't necessarily the talisman. Got Luis Diaz of Liverpool, Vitinha, Bernardo Silva. So I wanted a midfielder basically who is integral to their team, a talisman you could say, and for Man City right now, because I wanted basically haven't got Haaland. If I'm not going to have Haaland, then surely logic says that I'm going to have midfield cover from them. Rodri isn't that pick for me, and his ownership is super low in UCL Fantasy, but he's been getting regular starts in the Premier League if I can just find him there. And I've got, of course, 9.5 million to spend here as well. De Bruyne, 17%. So in he comes. Again, we know he's been tried and trusted. I think his ownership would have been a lot higher had he not been injured for a lot of the group games last season. So we know what De Bruyne is capable of, and I'm hoping that I haven't got Haaland to score the goals, but I've got De Bruyne to assist them at the very least. Foden would have been another option, but his minutes have been somewhat limited in the early part of this season. I mentioned Rodri at 7 million. If I wasn't able to afford De Bruyne or Haaland, I think Rodri would have been the go-to pick, provided he was fit. I think then there's just X-Men's issues with Gundogan, Doku, Grealish, Savio. I wouldn't just go that far. So I wanted like some sort of sensible Man City cover there. So I'm going to just go through the team as well once I confirm these transfers. So there we go, unlimited funds at the time of recording because it's before the deadline. Just look at those like-for-like moves. Haaland to Kane, I think that's justifiable. Gonzalez as an upgrade to Julian Brandt, I think that's an upgrade there. Then we've got De Bruyne versus Bellingham. I think that's logical because Bellingham is injured, but arguably, if Bellingham was fully fit, like it would be a hard move to justify. Konsa for Hakimi, Hakimi for Konsa. I think that's a big upgrade there. Cambiasso for Gatti, yes, for the attacking prowess. So I think that actually is a big improvement on my penultimate draft there. That all of these players make logical sense. Let's confirm the transfers, and then I'll go to my team. So just one thing I've noticed, an anomaly. So Harry Kane in particular, if I just zoom out slightly here as well. So Harry Kane is playing on the 17th. Mbappe is also playing on the 17th. And Gyökeres is also playing on the 17th. So if I was going to switch captain, I can't switch between them, unfortunately, for match day 1. So got De Bruyne, thankfully, with him. He's playing on the 18th. So if my captain doesn't fare well, then I could potentially go for De Bruyne. So that's an option I've got there as well. In terms of captaincy, just look at Harry Kane in that opening match, reasonable home game against Dynamo Zagreb. Mbappe's got Stuttgart. Gyökeres has got Lille. I'm actually going to go for Harry Kane as my captain. I think that's logical there. And just looking at my bench players, so Kubasi is playing on the 19th, so logical to have him there. And Yamal also on the 19th as well. Got Dedic, who's playing on the 18th. So they are my bench players. And Blaswich, just make sure my goalkeeper's right. He's playing on the 18th. And I believe Di Gregorio is playing on the 17th. So I think that's automatically assigned it there. Brilliant. So yeah, let's just do my famous super zoom in to validate those picks once again. So let's just go all the way in with those picks. So front line of Harry Kane, Mbappe, Gyökeres, all have got home games. Haaland clearly in this iteration is missing, so that's the biggest threat to my team right now. But the strengths clearly: Harry Kane, proven goal scorer and goal creator. Same with Mbappe, and Gyökeres's goal scoring record speaks for itself. I really hope he can basically carry that on in the Champions League with those generous opening games. So fairly content with that. And then the midfield, Gnabry started off fairly reasonably. De Bruyne, we know he's capable prowess in the Champions League and the Premier League as well. And then a rare double up for Sporting, Gonçalves with Gyökeres. So hoping that they both can get in the goal fund. I think Gonçalves, shocked he is 6.5 million. And then got Gluck of Salzburg, who has also been known for his goal involvements as well. You could say that, look, that what are the strengths here, that I've got quite a few like talismans, you could say, to some extent with these picks. But then at the same time, like, I'm not really looking at the those double digit players seem to be, or not double digit in UCL Fantasy, but like 9 million or more picks seem to be missing. But really, it would have been Bellingham who I would have wanted. I wouldn't have looked beyond that. But then haven't got Bellingham, I've got Mbappe. Haven't got Haaland, but I've got De Bruyne. Gone for the Bayern double up for that opening reasonable fixture. And then with Gluck and the fixtures in particular, if I just reconfirm it in a moment, that he's got a reasonable fixture run for the long term. And then onto the defence, got Schlotterbeck. I think it's well known that Dortmund have a very reasonable run of games during the group stages. And of course, they reached the final as well during last season. So I'm fairly happy with that. And just getting it up here as well. So Cambiasso, attacking prowess makes sense. Hakimi, attacking prowess as well. So with Schlotterbeck, not really as much with the attacking prowess, but fairly steady. I think if you ask me Schlotterbeck for 5 million or Konsa for 5 million, clearly you'd go for Schlotterbeck all day long. And then with Cambiasso and Hakimi, it's just got that extra edge there. And then Gregorio to start for that opening game, but then on the bench got Blaswich, and the rotation for Blaswich and Juventus is actually very good. In fact, I'm going to try and show it on my other screen here as well, just to show you how good it is. So just flipping my screen for a moment, Juventus have PSV at home, Salzburg have Sparta Prague. Next match, Leipzig away, Salzburg have Brest at home, Juventus have Stuttgart at home, Salzburg have Dynamo Zagreb at home, Lille away for Juventus. This is match day 4 now. Salzburg have Feyenoord at home. So for the first 4 games, it looks very reasonable having those 2 players as your rotating goalkeepers. Of course, you've got stick and twist in UCL Fantasy as well. So I think I'm fairly pleased with the goalkeeping situation. Coming on to the bench, so the remaining players, Dedic, 4.5 million. Salzburg have a good run of games despite them not being one of the heavyweights. Fairly content with that. Got Yamal to sub on if the players from Tuesday blank, and also Kubasi as well. 4.5 million is quite cheap for a Barcelona defender, but it's been getting regular starts, and I'd expect that to continue with the Champions League games as well. So there you have it. That is my locked in UCL fantasy team for match day 1 for the 24-25 season. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Have I got the balance right? Have I got the balance wrong? I think across the board, just an overall SWOT analysis, I think the balance is spot on. Weaknesses, there are some super high owned players that I don't have, such as Haaland, who's got 50% plus ownership. If he bangs in a hat trick and Kane blanks, then my season is effectively over in UCL Fantasy. But when it comes to UCL Fantasy as opposed to FPL, I'm willing to take more risks and experiment. But I think what I've done here is that I took a step back from those earlier drafts, and I think that despite there being a lot of differentials, that this team has a lot of potential as well. So yeah, keen to hear your feedback. I am not going to make any more changes now between the recording of this video and the Matchday 1 deadline. But important caveat, if I do come to know, let's say there's an injury to one of these key players, then I will make a transfer. But I am fairly content with these players now. And it was literally the Harry Kane hat-trick was the game changer. I looked at the fixtures as well that Bayern have. Wanted Haaland. I could really get Haaland, Mbappe, and Kane, but like I said, it makes for a lopsided team, and I haven't got 4 million to basically waste on cheaper players, and it basically means that I'm not relying on 4.5 defenders, and I've got another premium midfielder for good measure as well. But in terms of what I'm looking to achieve in UCL Fantasy this season, had a great start and was doing quite well up until the quarterfinals. I'm hoping to play the game in a way where I can really maximize points early on, and that with the balance and the stick and twist option on captaincy and subs as well, I hope that I can really benefit this time around, especially with the differentials I've got. So many low-owned players as well, but they're not like completely crazy picks. As always, if you're able to like, share, and subscribe, that will be greatly appreciated. Take care and all the best.